Accounting rate of return is the second investment appraisal technique. So the accounting rate of return is also a non-discounted cash flow. Some books call it as ROS. So in the exam they can ask you to say calculate the return on capital employed on your investment. It means it's the same as accounting rate of return. But the good thing is, to avoid you being confusing with the ROS in ratios, they'll just make sure that they use the accounting rate of return. So the accounting rate of return, what it does is that it measures the rate of return required on investments. So on your investment. So once you invest in assets, how much return are you expecting? So the formula is average profit over average investment times 100. Average profit over average investment times 100. So these formulas are not provided in the exam. We have to memorize. Average profit over average investment times 100. That's the formula that we'll be using. So let's look at this. Again, this will be multiple choice questions in the exam, not structured. So a project requires an initial cost of 5 million and will be scrapped at 2 million. The project will last 5 years. The following are the details of cash inflows. So I've got years 1 to 5. Then we have net profits. So the net profit is before deducting depreciation. Required, calculate the accounting rate of return. So I should make some amendments. So the key is the average profit. I think before I start calculating, I should also emphasize on this. I also need to include a formula for average investments. So average investment has a formula. So average investment is initial cost plus scrap value divided by 2. Okay, take note of this. So it means when you ask the accounting rate of return, before you do anything, find the average investment. Average profit is very easy to find, but average investment. So initial cost plus scrap divided by 2. Average profit, you just take your total profit divided by total number of years. That's our question. Now, in the exam, make sure you pay attention to the examiner. If the examiner is silent, we are going to assume that profit is after deducting depreciation. But if the examiner tells you that profit, if the examiner is silent, you are going to assume that profit is before depreciation. But if the examiner tells you that profit is after depreciation, it means you don't need to calculate depreciation. Now, for a question like this, what are you supposed to do? I think the first thing you can do is to calculate your depreciation. Why? Because profit should always be after depreciation. So from our financial accounting background, we learned that depreciation is cost minus scrap value divided by number of years. Okay, so cost is how much? 5. You pick $5 minus scrap value 2, which is 3, divided by number of years, which is 5. That's how we calculate depreciation. I think I've already done it somewhere. Yeah, here. So 3 million divided by 5 million. Because it's not in dollars. So $3 million are 5 million minus $2 million. So you get 0.6 million. That's our depreciation. Of course, you can start by profit, doesn't matter. Now, what about average profit? Now, average profit is total profit divided by number of years. So what's our total profit? So you should sum up all these profits from year 1 to 5. Because I can just confirm if I got the right answer. So you are going to add 0.7 plus 0.6 plus 0.5 plus 1.1 plus 0.8. If it's a loss, it means you'll be subtracting. So the answer is 3.7. That's your average profit. So you take 3.7 divided by 5. So the answer is 0.74. This is the shortcut, but some people, what they will do, they will put the profits, then deduct depreciation first from the profits, then later on calculate average profit. That's a waste of time. The best thing you can do, just take the total profit divided by number of years, then subtract the depreciation. Then that's the quickest way of finding average profit. So your average profit, the actual average profit will now be the average profit you calculated before depreciation minus your depreciation. So 0.14. That's your average profit. So you are getting $0.14. What about average investment? Average investment, we said, is initial cost plus scrap divided by 2. Our initial cost is 5 million, scrap is 2. So the answer is 7 divided by 2, you have 3.5. Now don't confuse depreciation and average investment. Depreciation is cost minus scrap, while average investment is cost plus scrap. Take note of that. Alright, so average profit is 0.14 divided by average investment 3.5 multiplied by 100. So we are getting an ARR. Let me see, ARR, average profit 0.14 over average investment, yeah, that is 4%. Okay, so 4% is our return. So it means from this investment we are earning a return of 4%. Now, however, there's another formula for ARR which is not common, because the examiner sometimes can say calculate ARR using initial investment. If you're not given scrap value in the exam, assuming we do not have scrap value, what would have been the formula? It would have been initial cost per scrap divided by 2, alright? But however, if the scrap value is 0, why divide by 2? Because it's the only investment. So when you are not given scrap value, don't use this formula. This formula is not going to work. If you don't have scrap value, it means ARR will just be average profit over initial investment. That's all. So it will be the average profit we calculated, 0.14 million divided by investment of 5 times 100, which is 2.8. So take note in the exam, watch out, are you given scrap or not? If you are not given scrap, you use initial investment. If you are given scrap, you use average investment. Alright, at this point I can invite questions before we start looking at the discounted cash flow techniques. So these are the questions that will come with a lot of marks in the exam.
Okay, so the interpretation will be like based on maybe 2 projects that maybe you are trying to adopt, or when using the IRR. You are getting the one which has the highest ARR.
Yes, you go for the one with the highest ARR.
Okay.
Okay. And now let's go to the discounted cash flow techniques. So discounted cash flow techniques are those which incorporate time value of money. The time value of money concept basically says that money today is worth more than tomorrow. So I can't include in notes, of course, but it actually means money today is worth more than tomorrow. So because of the time value of money, we charge interest. If you get money from the bank, let's say 1 million, they will charge you interest. Why are they charging you interest? They'll charge you interest because of time. They'll say, this 1 million that we're giving you today will not be the same in the next 3 years. So they'll charge you interest. So those are the discounted cash flow techniques that we are going to be looking at. So the major ones are two. Of course, we also have the discounted payback. But if you go to advanced financial management, you also add another one. We call it as the modified internal rate of return. So net present value is defined as the difference between cash inflows and cash outflows discounted at the relevant cost of capital. So the difference of your cash inflows and the cash outflows that you are going to discount at the relevant cost of capital. Now, the rule of net present value would be that you should accept the project if NPV is positive. So once we get a positive NPV, we should accept the project. We'll look at that shortly. Then we have the internal rate of return. Some books call it as the break-even NPV. Break-even NPV. So the internal rate of return is the discount rate which achieves an NPV of 0. So it gives you an NPV of exactly 0. So the formula for IRR is this. Even though in the exam they like providing A, B, but this one for me is easier because if you use this formula, it's easier for you to remember because we have got L and H. Now IRR, to calculate IRR, what we are going to do is we are going to have two discount rates. We are going to calculate two NPVs. After calculating two NPVs, we are going to use those NPVs and their rates and input them into this formula to get the internal rate of return. Now IRR is calculated as L plus, open brackets, NPVL over NPVL minus NPVH, then times H minus L. This is outside the formula. Before the decision rule, let's interpret. L is the lower rate. So if you have got two rates, let's say 5 and 10, 5 is the lower rate. Then H is the higher rate, which is 10. NPVL stands for NPV of lower rate. NPVH stands for NPV of higher rate. So take note of that. Those are the two the two techniques that we'll be using. Now the rule is this: if your IRR is greater than the cost of capital, then you should accept the project. So let's say IRR is 15, cost of capital is 16, then you're going to say the project should be undertaken. So that's the decision there. So we'll have a simple illustration before we go to the actual